So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where Kievan Rus comes back. Now Kievan Rus was an entity from the mid 11th century, this is it at its peak, and as you can see it was a very large country. It encompasses all of Belarus, a good portion of Ukraine, going up into very large parts of Russia, and even into parts of Finland. So what if this country came back? That's what we're going to be taking a look at in today's scenario. So if you guys do enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All the support is greatly appreciated as we're trying to get to 200,000 subscribers by the end of this summer. More specifically by August 1st for a special vlog that I'll release on this channel. If you haven't already, make sure to check out our channel memberships for early access to each and every single one of our videos. And let's go ahead and jump straight into this video. So Kievan Rus here is very large. Essentially what it is kind of like a Western Russia, except obviously, it has more land that's not Russian. But historically wise, in the past century, this land here has been subject to control of the Russians. Now it isn't too often that we see countries come back, because that actually doesn't really happen. But this one decided to appoint a dictator to its head of government. They are an authoritarian state, and now they are going on an imperialist conquest, which means that they're land hungry and they're going to be attacking their neighbors. And the first of which they're going after is actually Ukraine. Now, while on the topic of Ukraine, it's important to mention that Kievan Rus actually has a lot to do with the current day Russia-Ukrainian war, more so in its justification, but not entirely in its justification, more so in the department of Putin's reasoning as for why they feel like Ukraine should be a part of Russia. And that argument is that Kievan Rus is the original state of Russia. That's where Russia developed and came from. And of course, as we know, Kievan Rus took over a large portion of Ukrainian land as seen here, but not all of it. As we see here, this is Kievan Rus at its peak in the mid 11th century. If you ask me about these two little exclaves and if they exist, I couldn't tell you. This is just what the map that I was looking at had. And to be even more honest with you, I honestly don't know too much about Kievan Rus. So in the comments below, this is what I want us to do for today's video. Let me know all you know about Kievan Rus without having to look up any information. So just what you know off the top of your head. Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, Ukraine is going to lose here to Kievan Rus. They obviously stand no chance as this thing is very large and very powerful. In this treaty of peace here, we see that Ukraine is fully annexed by the Kievan Rusians. Is it Rusians or Kievan Russians? We're going to call them the Kievan Rusins, and if I'm wrong in saying that, then let me know in the comments below as well. But these guys now have even better access to the Black Sea, but they do not have control of Crimea. And also on the topic of Crimea, you'll see that I actually have officially switched Crimea's control over to Russian control. Russia controls the entire peninsula in real life, even before the modern day Russo-Ukrainian war. So I feel like we should just highlight that better, and I have decided to finally give Crimea over to Russia, even though it is contested. But on top of that, we've also added a lot more new things to this map, including capital cities. As you can see, every single country now has their capital city. They also now all have major cities, so we can see all the major cities of India, China, Africa, into North America, South America, and especially Europe. We see all of the major cities in Europe now. But that's not all. We also have rivers. Geography will now be an important factor in the AdizzPro world for the first time in a very long time. But also, we have provinces. Now, they're a little bit messy, but this doesn't really matter because you guys probably won't be seeing provinces too often. I'm just going to be using these to draw borders. But that's not all. We also have other things like new alliance layers, like the G7. We have BRICS in its entirety now. We even have the Rio Pact. So if you guys haven't seen the previous live stream where we did all that, first of all, shame on you for not being there. And second of all, just kidding, because obviously the time wouldn't have worked for everybody. But now we have the Kievan Rusins going after the Moldovans, or what remains of them, not much. So this will be a very quick and easy invasion for the Kievan Rusins. I don't even have to talk about it any more than I already have. So let's go ahead and get this peace treaty out of the way. Now I do want to say that Kievan Rus here has a end goal. They're not just going to go expand upon expand upon expand and just keep taking countries over, because that's not a really good strategy. That'll eventually get a bunch of countries angry at you. And when you have a bunch of countries that are collectively angry at you, they tend to band together and take you down. So Kievan Rus' strategy here is a little bit different. What they're going to be doing is they're going to be picking off these smaller countries. So like the Baltics, they might go after, maybe the Balkans. But Kievan Rus probably doesn't want to upset the Western nations too much, and that's because their end goal is to ultimately go to war with and invade Russia. Hey, wait a minute, my webcam is frozen. What? Hello? But anyway, as I was saying, Kievan Rus' strategy here, don't get the West mad at you, because you're going to need them when you invade Russia. If you invade Russia, let's make that more clear. Anyway, it's time for Lithuania to die, so the Kievan Rusins are now going to be declaring war on Lithuania. Now, I know I just said that you don't want to make the West angry, and Lithuania, of course, is a part of the West. So with my AdizzPro powers, I'm saying that this organization here, NATO, we're going to say that that doesn't exist anymore. I froze again. But we're saying that NATO doesn't exist, because otherwise Kievan Rus would not be able to expand at all, and this video would be very boring. But Lithuania is now now a part of Kievan Rus, and they have access to the Baltic Sea, which could be good for many purposes, such as economic purposes, easier routes for trade in the Baltics, or the Baltic Sea. I don't know why I got that mixed up for a second. But also, you can now have a navy that you can use in the Baltics, as opposed to just using your navy in the Black Sea. And there's also, just a ton of benefits for having ocean access. So, good. But now, to speed up the process of their imperialization and land expansion, the Kievan Rusins are going to declare war on both Latvia and Estonia at the same time. Now, unfortunately for the Kievan Rusins, this is actually already their breaking point. There's already a country who is going to be willing to... I'm frozen. Like I said, this is their breaking point, though. There's already going to be a country who's going to come to the aid of these two Baltic nations, and that nation is going to be none other than Finland. Now, we know that the Finnish and the Estonians hold close relations, but also these three nations are just, close in general. So Finland coming to their aid isn't too far-fetched, especially against a nation such as Kievan Rus, which is threatening not only the Baltics' existence, but also Finland's. Now, as the Kievan Rusins move into Latvia, the Finnish will try to recruit more countries to join in on this mini coalition, but unfortunately for them, they get no takers. Nobody appears interested in starting a war against Kievan Rus. Nonetheless, though, Finland will move into its previous land that the Kievan Rusins have taken from them, and even connect up with this lake here, starting to threaten the city of St. Petersburg. I guess this would be a good time to turn on the major cities and capitals. Sorry, I'm still not used to having major cities and capitals on this map. Oh, where should the capital of Kievan Rus be? Okay, we're not going to be historically accurate here. We're actually just going to be for fun. We're going to put their capital city in Kiev, because I feel like Kievan Rus should have their capital in Kiev. That's probably where it was in real life, and I'm just being stupid right now. But whatever, like I said, the Latvians are getting invaded, and eventually they will lose their capital city in Riga, which will be followed by an invasion into Estonia, which will instantly start to threaten their capital city of Tallinn. Is it pronounced Tallinn or Tallinn? Apparently it's called Tallinn. I'm just wrong on both accounts. But Latvia will fall, and eventually so will Estonia, as they lose their capital city and completely capitulate over to the Kievan Rusins. I don't know why I keep freezing. But now it's just Finland on their own, and what we have happening here is actually the Kievan Rusins aren't really interested in fighting back against the Finnish. It's not a part of their agenda, and to be completely honest with themselves, they don't even need the land that they have from Finland. They can just give it back. So that's exactly what they're going to do with Finland here. They're going to work out a deal. I'm going to freeze, and they are going to give their land back to Finland. So this is the peace treaty we have here. We have the Estonian and Latvian nations being annexed in the Kievan Rus, but we do have Finland getting their old borders back. So Kievan Rus does lose some land to Finland here, but they're okay with that because, once again, that's not a part of their agenda. That's not a part of their necessities. What is necessary for their expansion, however, is Russia. Now, the issue with Russia is that Russia, of course, is a very strong nation. The second strongest in the world, actually. Debatably, sometimes I like to say that China is stronger because I think that China actually is stronger than Russia. But according to a lot of rankings and just the internet in general, Russia is stronger than China. I disagree with that, but I'm just going to tell you what most people tell you. So yeah, Russia is the second strongest country in the world. Of course, they've lost land to Kievan Rus here, but they're still strong nonetheless, especially on the border with Kievan Rus. That is where most of Russia's strength is at. So Kievan Rus is definitely going to need the help of the Western nations of Europe, who are enemies with Russia in real life, of course, and we're going to go ahead and reflect that here. Unfortunately, even though that NATO doesn't exist, these countries still hold a close relationship with one another. Maybe that's through the EU, because that's not necessarily a military alliance, but more so an economical alliance with close implications, meaning that these nations can still, hold a very close relationship with each other and, respond as a group to outside threats, just not militarily, more so economically and diplomatically. So that's what we have happening here. Basically, the EU's like, screw you, Kievan Rus. So they will not be getting the help of the West, and this is unfortunate for the Kievan Rusins. However, that's okay, because they have a new plan, and this plan is called basically, screw the West, we're going to do this by ourselves. Let's invade Poland. Now, Poland was not a part of Kievan Rus's original plan. They really only wanted to expand their borders where they have already, plus Russia. But since the West does not appear to want to support the Kievan Rus's in a theoretical invasion of Russia, they're going to take matters into their own hands and gain power in their own way, and very similar to how they've already gained power, they're going to get that power from land annexation, this time coming from Poland. So their forces will go around Warsaw and start to encircle the city, as Polish forces are overwhelmed by the number of Kievan Rusin soldiers that they are facing up against. Now, it's very likely that Poland has a technology advantage against the Kievan Rusins, and that's because Poland is likely being backed by the Western nations of the entirety of the EU, plus nations across the ocean like the US and Canada, and maybe even to an extent nations over here in East Asia like Japan and Korea. So like I said, Poland likely likely has better technology than the Kievan Rusins do, but that doesn't really matter because the Kievan Ruses most certainly have a larger population than Poland does. It appears that the Eastern Europeans are once again throwing their soldiers at each other, but Warsaw will get fully surrounded by the Kievan Rusin forces very shortly after this major city down here in the south will be captured. Pretty sure this is Krakow. And then we have these guys' forces continuing to move out the front line and just moving across Poland. Really no resistance or counteroffensives are carried out by the Polish, and if they are, they're super unsuccessful and not even worth talking about. But eventually Warsaw will finally get captured, and that will officially capitulate Poland as they surrender on over to the Kievan Rusins. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Treaty of Krakow. And in this treaty, we have the Kievan Rusins annexing these provinces away from Poland. So just to show you which provinces, here's the province map, and here's an overlay of all the provinces that the Kievan Rusins have taken from Poland. Geography-wise, not much to really see here, but the Kievan Rusins will get 2 new major cities over here in Poland, which is certainly going to be good for their economy. Anyway, the Kievan Rusins now feel as if they're ready to take on Russia. Now, the issue with taking on Russia is, well, I've already kind of said it, but Russia's very strong, and they're also very large. That is the new issue. So when the Kievan Rusins declare war on Russia, they're definitely signing themselves up for an ambitious challenge. I mean, just look how big Russia really is. They don't care though, they're gonna go for it. The invasion of Russia will be a very, very difficult one, but fortunately for the Kievan Rusins, they do have a few advantages, such as up here in the Kola Peninsula, where Russia doesn't have access to this land. They've been cut off. So taking that is very easy. Additionally, the Russians do not have access to the Baltic Sea, meaning it's going to be very difficult for the Russians to supply Kaliningrad, their little fortress in Europe. So the Kievan Rusins will start to send their troops into this land, and they have a very difficult time taking it because, like I said, Kievan Rus is essentially a fortress over here in Eastern Europe. Another advantage that the Kievan Rusins have over the Russians is that Crimea is not connected to Russia at all. They have both bridges under their control. And of course, Russia's only connection to Crimea is through the Sea of Azov right here or going around down here. So when the Kievan Rusins move back into Crimea, it's captured completely. And I know that Russia's Black Sea Fleet is stationed in Sevastopol, so there's probably going to be a slight military holdout there by the Russian Navy until they can either evacuate all their ships, which likely isn't going to happen because the Kievan Rusins would just blow up all the ships that are trying to leave. Or maybe they try to retake Crimea. Not likely though, because the Kievan Rusins are going to be going on the offensive here as they move out from the Ukrainian areas and start to connect up with their exclaves. Now the Russians will be able to capture this one, and honestly I really do want to know the history behind whatever this exclave is. Please let me know in the comments if you know why this exists. But like I was saying, the Kievan Rusins, they're going to focus a majority of their troops in the Ukrainian front area, and that's because their capital city, of course, is in Kiev, and they do not want to lose that because losing your capital city is never a good thing. It means that you usually have to move your government to a different city, which is often costly and very difficult. So it's best just to not lose your capital city. But the Kievan Rusins will continue their advance into Russian territory, aiming to push up against this major river over here. They eventually do, making the front line now look something like this, and also making it easier to travel down the bank of the river towards this major city, in which they will eventually capture. With this city and now the entrance to the river under their control, the Kievan Rusins will have a very easy time pushing across this area of Russia and reaching the border of Kazakhstan, essentially severing Russia into 2 pieces. They will then follow the river over here, now connecting up with their exclave, which they will happily walk right on into and liberate. Back over in Kaliningrad, we have it completely falling. But up in the north, we see the Russians have a slight counteroffensive, now moving in to Kievan Rusin territory, which is largely undefended, but also largely unuseful for the Kievan Rusians, so they're okay with Russia, kind of taking a bunch of land. The only thing that they're threatening is, of course, this major city right here, so they will send some forces up north to deal with the defense of this city, and also some forces to just, overall regulate this expansion and make sure that it doesn't go too far. Meanwhile, though, down south, things are not going so great for Russia. Their forces are getting pushed into the Caucasus Mountains, and eventually these forces will have to fight guerrilla warfare in this area as the Kievan Rusins take complete control of southern Russia and then move their forces up north to deal with the rest of Russia, which for simplicity's sake will just be these 6 major cities, as moving into western Russia and Siberia would likely be unnecessary, as Russia would probably capitulate at this point. So, with that being said, a new offensive will start, and the Kievan Rusins are going to have their strategy be this. They want to push up against this major river right here, as this will give them access to 3 of the 6 major cities that they need. So they start to focus their forces in on capturing this piece of land, and the Russians realize this, but unfortunately for the Russians, they're unable to respond. They lose one of their major cities up north, and then the Kievan Rusins start to rapidly push into this area, following the river and now threatening 2 of these major cities. With inadequate forces to deal with the very large Kievan Rusin army, we have both of these major cities falling to them. At this point, Kievan Rus is halfway done to completing their goal of wiping Russia off the map. Well, maybe not wiping them off the map, that might be a little bit too harsh, but taking a bunch of land from them. At this point, we also see the Kievan Rusins push back in the north, now making Russia's counteroffensive look like nothing. However, at the same time, we do have the Russian forces moving down south here and starting to look like they might retake this major city. They don't though, they're eventually stopped by Kievan Rusin forces. And now it's pretty apparent what they need to do next, because the Russians are threatening this major city, and we can't have that happening, can we? So they cross the border, and yeah, this whole area falls. And not only that whole area, but Russia as a whole starts to fall apart as Kievan Rusin forces start to move right across, and eventually all 3 of these major cities are captured by the red team's army. We also have them kicking all Russian forces out of their territory, and here we had the surrender of Russia right on over to Kievan Rus. So the original beats the copycat. Just kidding, Russia, I'm sorry. But now we can go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty, which honestly probably won't be too brutal on Russia, but still, let's go ahead and take a look at this treaty. So in this treaty here, we see the Kievan Rusins are actually going to take a bunch of land, but like I said, Russia will still exist. Obviously, they're not going to be completely annexed because that would be ridiculous. But the Kievan Rusins will take over all of the Kola Peninsula, they'll take over all of Kaliningrad, all of Crimea, and then they will take over all of this land from Russia. So this is actually just a bunch of provinces. Like I said, we're going to start using province borders to draw new borders when countries go to war with each other, and you know, obviously when they make peace deals with each other. But also not just provinces, because as you can see here, this border doesn't completely follow provinces. You can see that something does change up here in the north, and what that is actually the provinces changing into following a river. This is following whatever river this is for just this short distance. So yeah, that is going to do it for Kievan Rus's expansion. They have certainly made themselves a very large country here, and honestly, this is probably one of the strongest countries in the world at this point. They have a bunch of land and very populated, developed, and economically prosperous land from Russia. All of Ukraine, which is arguably essential for having an empire over here in this part of Europe. You have a very large Baltic coast. You have half of Poland. You have all this land up here in Karelia and Kola, of which, you know, is full of nuclear bombs, but we don't really ever talk about bombs. And then down here you have Crimea, which is strategically important. You have a bunch of Black Sea coast, and then you have the Caucasus Mountains down here to your south. And if you ever needed to go to war with Russia again, you also have the Ural Mountains over here in this part of Russia. So if you want to invade up until this line, then you would have an entire eastern mountainside as your border. So Kievan Rus here, they're in a pretty good spot, and they can honestly go even further and get even stronger. But that is actually going to do it for today's video. So if you guys did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All the support is greatly appreciated, as we're trying to get to 200,000 subscribers by August 1st. I'm recording this on July 1st, you're seeing it on July 2nd, so we have around a month to get there. It's a very tall task. However, we're only 8,500-ish away, which means that if you guys start to share the channel with your friends, get some friends to subscribe, get family members to subscribe, we can very easily get there. If this video gets 30,000 views and half of you do that, then that's 15,000 more subscribers, and that easily pushes us over our goal of 200,000 subscribers. So once again, even if you think that you wouldn't make a difference, all of the support does make a difference. I promise you that it does. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here and you know, asking you guys to show support. But of course, you only show support if you're actually happy with the product, so I'm not going to force you guys to do that. Only do it if you think I deserve it. Do I deserve it? I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. Anyway, once again, thank you all so much for watching this video. Make sure to let me know in the comments all you know about Kievan Rus off the top of your head, not Google searching it. That's cheating. And I don't want to see any ChatGPT answers either. That would be, it would be funny, but it would be incorrect. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. And of course, thank you to all our super fans. This includes Chill Turn Mapping, Omega the YouTuber, Illy Goated, Nevada Garbage Trucks, Vista Mapper, Xander Pro Productions, Geo1010 Gamer, Knighthood 7353, and Golden Ball Mapping, 101 Rotanami T, King Cheese, Australian Geo Guy, Serminator, Icy Static FN, CTG on YT, Eagsco, Euroball, Augusto, A Norwegian, RS, Gail Martinez, Zaylance, What in the World? Freezioi, Laser Taze, Pablo Sigma Cat, Death Strider X, Hammer Toad 45, and DW Cool Dude. Once again, thank you guys.